Namaste and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Mindful Serenity. And we're going to continue with answering a question from the jar. I'm just going to dig out my timer here. And I'm going to pull out a question, start my timer, take a deep breath, and exhale. And try to do my best to read this question, let alone answer it. The question I got is a very interesting one. I have mentioned that I practice both Tai Chi and yoga. So the question was, how can you practice yoga and Tai Chi at the same time? And the answer to that question is that there is a lot of similarities between both practices. One practice deals with the emergence of Qi, which is the natural flow of energy within the body, and the other one, comes from Tai Chi, obviously, and the other one deals with shakti, which is the natural flow of energy in the body. And it's all about releasing this energy so it flows freely. So both practices, whether you call it Qi or shakti, are dealing with this universal energy that is radiating through us as human beings in these physical bodies, in these physical forms that we find ourselves encapsulated in. It is also the energy, prana, which is the yogic term, for the energy of the entire world, the universal energy, the cosmic energy. And we see that in Chinese medicine as well, which is where Tai Chi came from. So Tai Chi is a meditative process. It's probably not as old as yoga is, though it is fairly old. And it started long ago, during the time of Confucianism and Taoism, or probably even preceding that, actually, in Chinese history. And yes, Buddhism had left India by that time and started to very slowly infiltrate into China, into that culture. And already they had the culture of Confucianism and Taoism going on, and we see these Buddhist influences coming in with all three. So Tai Chi's got both the philosophical influence of Buddhism, of Confucianism, very mildly so, and greatly of Taoism. So it is a wonderful combination of Buddhist and Taoist philosophy, which I love both of and study both of. So it is great for this human I call me to study and practice Tai Chi for that reason as well. Yoga, of course, originated in India, preceding Buddhism. So we see that long before, and we don't know exactly when it started. Patanjali is one of the first founding fathers of yoga, but he's not necessarily the only one that did, or was the first to do yoga. There may have been rishis before him that tapped into this wonderful idea of unity of consciousness, this field that unites everything, the ultimate foundation of matter, as scientists, quantum mechanics, and scientists in the physics field are starting to determine that consciousness is fundamental. It's a fundamental source of everything. Time and space comes from consciousness. Consciousness does not come from time and space. And of course, she's used to spend years in caves analyzing in their laboratory of their own minds, trying to analyze this concept and to understand who it is we actually are with the who am I question. And then, more modern day yogis like Maharishi came up with the idea that there's a direct realization of this I amness that comes with that question, who am I? And when we begin to realize that, all the other things start to melt away. So in Tai Chi, it's both of yoga, and I think the individual might be assuming here that we're looking at the hatha component and the pranayama component of yoga. I'm assuming and I'm sure this is what they meant, compared to the physical exercise of Tai Chi. So we're looking at Qi and Shakti within the body and how we're releasing it. And we do that, of course, with breath. And a big part of Tai Chi is the breath, the universal breath, So we breathe in the energy through our breath, and we expel it through our breath. And in yoga, we do the same with pranayama, which is a component of hatha yoga. And we move the body in ways that will encourage this flow. The thing about the hatha component of yoga, though, it's not near as old as the physical exercise form of Tai Chi. The hatha component yoga, most of the poses we do in a studio were derived by gymnasts in India in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So in the Pradipika, which is one of the oldest texts of hatha yoga, we see only 3 or 4 poses which were related to helping us to meditate. So another big similarity between yoga and Tai Chi is the meditative component of stilling the mind and allowing the energy to flow, getting out of the way of the energy flow, getting out of the way, with our psyche's gone and whatever, and we're just experiencing the flow. So I don't want people to get confused with the origins of hatha yoga as a physical exercise being comparative to the physical exercises of Tai Chi. Again, a hatha component was derived much later than what true yoga represents. If we look at Raja Yoga or any of those types of yogas, it was just a small, tiny little component. And most of the yoga poses at the beginning of yoga in its history were just poses that would help us to relax and meditate easier. What we see as, downward facing dog and all those that we're doing now were derived by gymnasts in India as part of a way of practicing yoga and getting the energy to flow, but also as a way of exercising the body and creating showmanship and all that. So there is an element of that that's not completely authentic to the true teachings of yoga, and I just want people to understand that. Whereas Tai Chi was established, like I said, in China between those 3 philosophies, but we see it going between, mostly in the Taoist monasteries. We see Shaolin, which is an earlier form of Tai Chi, martial art. Tai Chi is a martial art, yoga isn't a martial art, but Tai Chi is the physical exercise of Tai Chi is a martial art meant for defense and protect, but it's also often called the internal martial art because it's more about releasing the chi, more about inner power rather than force, which is one of the biggest concepts of Taoism, is it not? And again, later, which Zen Buddhism, of course, is influenced greatly. It's one of those schools of Buddhism that is influenced greatly by Taoist thought, because we see it mostly in Asia, in the Asian communities, where Taoism would have been infiltrated quite a bit at the time that Buddhism entered the picture. So we see that both in Zen and in Taoist thought, this idea of allowing the flow and not forcing against the flow. So we're creating inner power through, if we look at it in terms of how it's used in combat, right? So we use the energy of the human being that's coming at us, not so much against them, but for our own benefit, so that we can kind of step out of the way and allow the flow to go, and then we use the energy within as our might, rather than that tensing up and grabbing the muscles and whatnot to take that person by force. So that's the difference between that. So we don't see martial arts in yoga, but we do see it in Tai Chi. So it is beautiful in that way, right? So of course, a true master of Tai Chi will say you have to learn the martial arts component, not just the exercise. It can't just be a dance. I like the dance component of it. I like the flow of energy I feel when I'm doing, say, the 24 Yang style. Very simple. I learned it on myself. I did, there's 2 different schools of Tai Chi, Chan and Yang. I do the Yang style now. I started out with the other one years ago on 108 poses, which was much more complicated to remember. And it was mostly the teacher teaching it was a martial artist, so he did other things like Shaolin, and he was just using Tai Chi to earn a buck, very much so, pretty much so. So he was teaching us how to use it in combat, which was different than what I like to do now. It's just the flow of energy with the 24 Yang. But I'm very, very aware how, oh my goodness, it's storming out there. Very, very aware of how that energy can be, energy used in martial art or combat. So every pose I'm doing, I'm conscious, okay, because that's a defense pose. So that's a pulling back pose. That's retreat, right? That's a strike. And that's a run, and that I'm running to or I'm running away from my opponent when I look at these poses. So I am aware of that in Tai Chi, but I don't necessarily use it that way. I'm concentrating on the flow of energy and the flow of chi. To me, it's all about the chi. And in yoga, for me now, I'm I still do hatha. I do both physically in the physical form. I do Tai Chi for about an hour a day, and I do yoga for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a day. So I'd combine them both, usually maybe different times of the day. And then I'm using some of the poses in my yoga, some of the flow series I'm using in Tai Chi, I use in my yoga, and vice versa. I may strengthen my legs prior to a Tai Chi practice by doing, down warrior poses or something along that line. So I do combine the physicality of these exercises together to some extent, but it's this idea of internal energy that I'm mostly interested in. And the more I'm thinking scientifically about energy, and the more I'm starting to realize that everything is energy. Einstein was right, Max Planck was right. The fundamental nature of everything is this conscious energy. We don't understand it. We can't measure it yet with our scientific tools, but it is definitely there. And when you practice Tai Chi, you can actually feel it moving through your body. You feel it in your palms, your hands especially. And in some yoga practices, I will feel it as well. So it is definitely that is why I practice both, because I'm looking to free shakti, I'm looking to free chi. And though yoga is about, 7 chakras, of course there's much more chakras than that in yogic philosophy, but the ones we concentrate on in this contemporary yoga are the 7 chakras. There are 3 dantians in Tai Chi, the lower dantian, the heart dantian, and of course, where the third eye is in yoga, we have another dantian here where the pineal gland is, or pineal gland, I don't care how you pronounce it. And that is where we see a lot of clarity, and that's a very important one for understanding chi and the release of chi. But chi is stored in the lower dantian in Tai Chi, and we see it wrapped around the spinal cord in yoga, as in Shakti form, or your Kundalini if you want to call it, and it's wrapped around like a serpent at the base, at the root chakra, which would be where the lower dantian is in Tai Chi, and the idea is to have it flow up, and we want to move in Tai Chi as well, the energy from the lower dantian to the heart dantian to the upper dantian, and we want to move Shakti in yoga, or Kundalini in yoga, from the base of the spine all the way up to the third eye and above to the 1,000-petaled lotus, which sits a little bit above the head. So there is so many similarities in these philosophies, and kind of blows you away because they're both pretty old ancient, but yoga to me is the most ancient. So where did that start? Like, where did these ideas come from? It hasn't come from some kind of ethereal knowledge that pre-existed before human minds start thinking that they knew everything, right? So I think that is what's interesting to me. This energy is very, very real, and it's a felt experience of energy that you get from both yoga, hatha yoga, and from Tai Chi. And of course, the comparative too is why you can practice the both of them, is the meditative component, because they both deal a lot with meditation and stillness, and getting the mind, the personal mind, and the sense of me out of the way, so that life, can flow through us as the energy forms it comes into, and it comes in, and it doesn't matter what you call them, really. Energy is energy. But anyway, I'm hoping that makes sense. I think I just talked myself around in a circle again, but oh well. Being imperfect is a part of this process. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.